As you may know, my close ties with Canada go back almost 4 decades, to the time when many thousands of Asian refugees from Uganda, including many Ismailis, were welcomed so generously in this society. These ties have continued through the cooperation of our Aga Khan Development Network with several Canadian institutions, including the establishment 4 years ago of the Global Centre for Pluralism in Ottawa. I had the opportunity last week to chair a highly productive meeting there of the Centre's Board of Directors. Earlier this year, we celebrated here in Toronto the foundation ceremony for the Aga Khan Museum and a new Ismaili Centre. So there are powerful chords of memory from 4 decades ago, 4 years ago, and even 4 months ago that tie me closely to Canada. I was also deeply moved by Canada's extraordinary gift to me of honorary citizenship. I always have felt at home when I come to Canada, but never more so than in the wake of this honor. And if I ever felt any trepidation about accepting this invitation, it has been significantly reduced by the fact that I can now claim, however modestly, to be a Canadian. Thank you. Many thanks go to all of you who are attending this lecture or are watching and listening from elsewhere. It is a busy autumn, I know. For one thing, I believe the undefeated Maple Leafs are playing on television at this very hour. My friends, my Canadian friends, like to tell me about a time when the Stanley Cup playoffs were in full swing, and a gentleman took his seat in the front row of the stadium, leaving a seat open next to him. His neighbor asked why such an excellent seat for such an important event was unclaimed. And the man explained that his wife normally sat there, but that she'd passed away. The neighbor expressed his sympathies, but asked whether a member of the family or another relative or friend might have been able to use the ticket. No, the man replied, they're all at the funeral. The subject of tonight's lecture may not have quite the emotional hold of the Stanley Cup, but for me, it has been a matter of immense importance. On the Iberian Peninsula, between the 8th and the 16th centuries, Muslim, Christian, and Jewish cultures interacted creatively in what was known as Al-Andalus. Remarkably, it lasted for most of 7 centuries, a longer period than the time that has since passed. The fading of Al-Andalus came as a new spirit of nationalism rose in Europe, propelled by what scholars have called a sense of imagined community. Where local and tribal loyalties once dominated, national identifications came to flourish. As we know, these nationalist rivalries eventually exploded into World War. The post-war emergence of the European Union has been a response to that history, much as regional groupings from Southeast Asia to Central Asia, from Latin America to Eastern Africa, have been testing the potential for pan-national cooperation. This brings me to the story of Canada, shaped so fundamentally by two European cultures. This dual inheritance was an apparent weakness at one point, but it was transformed into an enormous strength, thanks to leaders like La Fontaine and Baldwin, as well as those who shaped the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in 1982, and so many others who contributed to a long, incremental process. That process has been extended over time to include a broader array of peoples, the First Peoples and the Inuits, and a host of new immigrant groups. I am impressed by the fact that some 44% of Canadians today are of neither French nor British descent. I am told, in fact, that a typical Canadian citizenship ceremony might now include people from 24 different countries. To be sure, the vision I am describing is sometimes questioned and still incomplete, as I know Canadians insist on acknowledging, but it is nonetheless an asset of enormous global value.
Welcome et bienvenue. Welcome to Friday Night Reflections. I'm Arif Virani, the Member of Parliament for Parkdale-High Park and the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice. And I wanted to extend a very warm welcome to Jamaati members, to multi-faith family members, and to everyone else watching from across Canada and indeed from around the world. I hope that you enjoyed your week and you've been staying safe. With the school year concluding and all of this heat descending upon all of us here in Canada, especially in the western half of the country, there is no question that summer has definitely arrived. Of course, one indicator that summer is here is Canada Day, which we are commemorating today. Generally, this is a time of barbecues and fireworks, but this year's anniversary of Canadian Confederation is more solemn and it requires more reflection. The recent unearthing of almost 1,000 unmarked graves of Indigenous children at Indian residential institutions in British Columbia and in Saskatchewan has challenged all of us. It compels us to reflect honestly on how Canada was built in modern times, to learn more about the Indigenous experience on this land, and to commit to transparency and accountability and justice as we all work on reconciliation together. I think we must also reflect on deepening fissures in our society that the pandemic has exposed, whether that is anti-Black racism, anti-Asian sentiment fueled by COVID-19 stigma, and most recently and most horrifically, the hate-driven murders of fellow Muslims in London, Ontario, in an Islamophobic act of rage. What do these events tell us about the state of multiculturalism, diversity, and pluralism in Canada in 2021? How should we feel about our country, the country that Mawlana Hazar Imam has asked us to make our home? I think the starting point for this discussion was provided recently, right here on Friday Night Reflections, by the Right Honourable Adrienne Clarkson. When she was here, she reminded us that being part of Canada is not like attending some sort of buffet and taking what you choose, but rather, she said, it's more analogous to a fixed menu, and that as Canadians, all of the history that we have lived through is our collective responsibility, a joint obligation where we all have to acknowledge the wrongdoings of the past and present and get to work on helping to heal together. And tonight, that is how we will commemorate this occasion, by hearing about some of the members of our Jamaat, people who have given to our country to make it better in really remarkable ways. I personally am very proud to be able to host this episode of Friday Night Reflections. Of course, working to make the country better is something that I've aspired to in my career and the better part of my adulthood. Like many of you watching today, I arrived in Canada with my family as a refugee from Uganda. At the time when I arrived, I was a tender baby of 10 months old. My family first found support at the Stanley Street YMCA in Montreal in 1972. We later established ourselves in Toronto, where my parents, like many immigrant families, struggled with establishing a home while navigating the multiple challenges that life in a strange and much colder country presented. But we took advantages of the opportunities that we were presented with. After completing my undergraduate studies at McGill, with the help of an Aga Khan Foundation scholarship, and my law degree at the University of Toronto, I began working as a constitutional litigator, advocating on issues of human rights and access to justice. I had the privilege of working as an analyst with the Canadian Human Rights Commission in Ottawa, as an investigator avec la Commission des droits de la personne et des droits de la jeunesse in Montreal, and as an assistant trial attorney working with the UN prosecuting genocide at the UN International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, which took me back to East Africa. I was also very proud to be an active member of my broader community, supporting various civil society organizations involved in things like access to justice and legal aid services for members of the South Asian community, things like shelters for abused women, entities that worked on food security and addressing mental health stigma. I then made a decision to enter politics, and I've had the honor of being the Member of Parliament for Parkdale-High Park since 2015. The shift into the political realm was not an easy decision for me, my wife, or my children. However, I wanted to be able to influence policy and help to bring about positive change through the levers of government, and I have not looked back since. It has been my deepest privilege to have been given several roles by the Prime Minister since 2015. I first served as the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Immigration shortly after my first election, given the opportunity to work directly on the resettlement of a new wave of refugees, in this case Syrians, who were coming to this country in 2016. Next, I was asked to serve as the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Heritage, focusing both on Indigenous language protection and reconciliation, as well as on increasing funding and supports for multiculturalism in Canada. Most recently, the Prime Minister appointed me as the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice. Here, I've been working on helping to tackle issues like the proliferation of online hatred. Today, as we reflect on this point in the history of Canada, on what we stand for and what we can become and how we can all contribute, we remember the words of Mawlana Hazar Imam when speaking about building peaceful, pluralist societies. He reminded us, and I quote, "Developing support for pluralism does not occur naturally in human society. It is a concept which must be nurtured every day in every forum, in large and small government and private institutions, in civil society organizations working in the arts, culture, and public affairs, and in the media, in the law and in justice, particularly in terms of social justice, such as health, social safety nets and education, and in economic justice, such as employment opportunities and access to financial services." So tonight I say to you, let us embark on a Canadian journey to building and strengthening our pluralist society. What we will do is we will commence this evening with stories from Jamaati members who serve Canada in truly remarkable ways. We will then move to reflect on Canadian citizenship ceremonies, which I know many of our viewers, including me, have participated in directly. And we will conclude, as always, with musical expressions. Without further ado, let us hear from some Jamaati members who are dedicating their services to this country.
My name is Neelam Jetta. I work for the Ministry of Culture, Multiculturalism and Status of Women in Alberta, and I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister for Status of Women and Strategic Integration. So really, I've been in government for 29 years now, and it's been service for 29 years. So once I got into the policy work, where it was actually creating policies and in serving the people, in making sure they were healthy, they had income security, looking after the most vulnerable in our population, then you felt a sense of satisfaction that you were doing something that was meaningful. You actually got to see the difference you made in the way Albertans live.
I am a justice on the Court of Queen's Bench for the province of Saskatchewan. And in Saskatchewan, and every province is a little different, but in Saskatchewan, we have different levels of court, just like they do in other provinces. In our province, we have a provincial level of court. Then we have the Court of Queen's Bench, which is the court on which I sit. Then we have the Court of Appeal. And then, of course, there is the Supreme Court of Canada. Every court has a slightly different role. For example, the provincial court, they will hear a lot more in terms of volume, but they won't necessarily hear the same types of cases. For example, they will not hear cases that involve juries. They will not hear murder type cases. Our level of court will hear those types of cases, along with decisions involving family law matters, civil litigation matters, and appeals from things like arbitrations, certain panels, and certain decisions of the provincial court.
My role at Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada is Assistant Deputy Minister for Transformation, Digital Strategy and Chief Information Officer. What does that mean? That means that right now with Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, we're 95% paper-based. Our processes are cumbersome, they're complex, and they've been there for years, for many, many years. And with technology that's changing, with the number of immigrants that are coming to Canada, my job as the Chief Information Officer and in charge of digital strategy and transformation is to leverage technology so that we can move away from paper and make it easier for people who want to come to Canada and to remove the backlog. So that is what an Assistant Deputy Minister does. And I have a very, very large department, and I have the mandate to move these files forward.
I'm an aerospace engineer by trade. That's how I joined the Canadian Armed Forces. So that was over 23 years ago now. The Lieutenant Colonel job, really, or the rank of Lieutenant Colonel, is a senior officer rank. And typically, you make it through the ranks and you do different jobs throughout your career as you transition. But the common theme usually is following your trade. So mine is an aerospace engineer, so I'm in the Royal Canadian Air Force, and I work with aircraft maintenance in many different facets of maintenance, whether it be, just recently I came from, returned from Warner Robins, Georgia, and I was a senior design engineer for the CC-177 Globemaster, which is our strategic airlift aircraft. So, that's what I did for 3 years down in Warner Robins, working collaboratively with the U.S. Air Force and some of our allies. I'm about to just go in a couple of weeks here. I'll be taking command of 14 Air Maintenance Squadron, which is a unit that supports the CP-140 aircraft, our maritime patrol aircraft here in Greenwood, Nova Scotia. And basically look after the periodic inspection for this aircraft and look after all the components that would be maintained at the second line maintenance. So kind of give you an example of a myriad of different jobs within that particular trade to give you some examples of the type of work. Certainly, as a lieutenant colonel, or even in the military, you're an officer first. So I've done out of trade jobs, they call them. So certainly have been an executive assistant for the wing commander at 19 Wing in Comox on the west coast, and I've been a military observer in the Sudan. I've also been an advisor to the head of academics at Pontoon, Hawaii, which is the Kabul Air University, looking after the Afghanistan's Air Force and producing technicians and aircrew to sustain their Air Force. So I was an advisor there for 9 months with the university. So it's a myriad of different jobs, and that's what's really interesting about it in serving in this capacity, is really you get a breadth of experience in different types of jobs throughout your career, and certainly that is accompanied by many moves as well. This will be my 14th move in the Canadian Armed Forces, and I've been in 23 years. So,
Assistant Deputy Minister means that you are your Deputy Minister's right hand. And when your Deputy Minister is away, you're acting Deputy Minister and connecting with the Minister directly. And even as Assistant Deputy Minister, we are always presenting to the Minister on the best possible solutions. So we are very evidence-based, and we present to our Minister to say, here's what we think. And now more and more often, we are doing more cross-ministry initiatives. So we're presenting to more than one minister to get our point across, and in a very non-biased manner, because we are not politicians as government employees. We are public servants, and making sure that we are putting forward the best possible solutions for Albertans or Canadians, and then it becomes a political decision on what the minister or the government wants to do with the information we provided, the briefings we provided them, right?
Well, I had a lot of help from a lot of different people. We never get to where we are on our own, and in my case, I had the support of my parents. I also had the support of colleagues, and I had support of members of the judiciary. I had gotten almost 20 years of experience as a practicing civil litigator, and I felt that I could make a bigger difference and a bigger impact on the world around me as a member of the court, and so I made the decision to apply.
Right now we have one system, and the one system that we have is services the entire immigration continuum. So it doesn't just service the Immigration and Refugees and Citizenship Canada department and not just for processing. It is a system where Global Affairs Canada, Canada Border Services, Immigration and Refugee Board, Employment and Social Development Canada, all of these departments use our system in the processing of different files. And our clients also use that system. It's legacy. It was built before the VHS. I think it was 8-track technology that was around. It was built in that time. And so what we're trying to do now is, as we try to digitize and turn and move away from paper, what we're finding is that we're unable to move the target of moving away from paper because the legacy technology, it just can't keep up. It's not able to. We can't connect the cloud to the technology. So what we have to do is reduce the amount of cumbersomeness in the current legacy technology, while at the same time, in parallel, we're building a brand new platform that will allow us to not only digitize, but to be able to do predictive analytics, robotics, artificial intelligence, advanced analytics, and it will also allow us to be able to leverage the data that we have for in service of the people who want to come, so they only enter their data once.
My passion is aviation. That is what I always wanted to do. I remember, I always tell this story. I remember growing up in Iringa on Jamaat Street in front of my dad and mom's shop, the family shop, a hardware store that they had there. Every now and then you'd see a plane go by. It would be a Cessna, a very small plane. Not a frequent occurrence, but that would happen. And as a kid, I would be very much interested in that, and I aspired to work in aviation. So certainly, joining the Royal Canadian Air Force was a natural thing for me to pursue because it allowed me to access a career in aviation. And it allowed me to access multiple different platforms in the Royal Canadian Air Force, so the diversity of platforms. So that has been a passion, and it's kind of a dream fulfilled. And doing so while serving our country, which I think is, a remarkable opportunity, and I take it as a privilege to serve.
And so people said, hey, work for the government. It's a 5-day job, 8:50 to 4:30. It's great. And that's how I started. It was a summer job, and I was going to look at something else, but I have a degree in education from University of Toronto. And so that kind of gets your foot in the door. And I had amazing mentors, and that's the thing about any workplace. Make sure that you have some really good mentors who support you, because I had amazing opportunities. And so I, became a director, an executive director really, really quickly because of the support I had. And you have to prove yourself. And I took on a lot of challenging roles, which were very across ministry. So you were using your, not your authority, but your influence and your collaboration and teamwork to get initiatives completed. So then you commanded respect. And that goes a long way in government. People know about you then. And then they want you to run bigger projects. So my deputy minister said, my ADM at that time said, I want you to stay and look at those bigger projects we have, which was pension policy, insurance. I had no idea about insurance, and also financial institutions, ATB, which is a Alberta bank. We govern it, we regulate it. So I learned a lot, and so it was all about regulations and policies, and I fell in love with doing policies. You know, when Uber first came into Alberta, they came in saying, we're digital, so everything is fine, we don't need to be insured. And that's when I realized that Albertans are not safe getting into that Uber car because they're not insured. Something happens, they will not have insurance to cover any liabilities that they will face. So I was the first woman superintendent in Alberta for Treasury Board and Finance as a regulator. I put a stop to it. And it was like, wow, I'm doing something that's going to help people. But then we also put a policy in place within 6 months to make sure that Uber could operate and provide those services that everybody loved. So it was those kind of things that gave me that satisfaction that Albertans were actually I was keeping them safe, and I was doing something very beneficial for them, right? And then, status of women is close to my heart, and that ministry had opened up 3 years ago when a position for the assistant deputy minister came up, I put my hand up and I said, that's the place I want to be in, because that is where my passion is. That's where I want to help women make sure that they get the opportunities, racialized women, indigenous women, vulnerable women. How do we make sure that their needs are being met? There are so many barriers, and sometimes we come from a place of privilege and we don't see that. But having come over as a refugee and having seen my parents work really hard, it kind of, put that sense that I needed to do something for women.
As a commercial litigator in a large firm, I dealt a lot with businesses. I did not deal largely with family law matters, though I had some experience in that area. I did not have a great deal of experience in criminal law and those areas. But now I'm hearing cases where, for example, I have to decide, where is a child going to stay, or should a child be apprehended? That to me is very important work. It's work that makes a meaningful impact in a child's life, and certainly I felt that is something that I wanted to do. And so that's one of the reasons why I made the switch.
And I mentor and coach many people, and they'll often say, I want to work for government. I have an ambition to follow in the footsteps that you have. I want to become an assistant deputy minister. And I say, don't stop there, become a deputy minister. And often many of these are students. And what I say to students is that when you're in a program in the university or in college, whether you're in a co-op program or not, join the government as a student. There are various mechanisms to be able to come into the federal government as students. We want students because they bring in a fresh breath air, and to transition from being a student into a full-time employee in the government is much easier than if you haven't gone down this path in this process. And the second advantage is, if you're a student and you come in, it's a testing ground. You can learn, is public service and life in federal government what I want? And as a student, it'll help you to determine whether it is or it isn't. So it's a good testing ground as well.
The consideration for the Air Force really, when we first came to Canada, that was in 1993, and it was just looking for opportunities. I didn't know I was going to join the Canadian Armed Forces, to be honest with you. And I recall my brother, Rahim, showing me the advertisement for the Royal Military College. And I started reading the pamphlet, and then that pursued to look into it a little bit more and look at the types of trades and employment opportunities. And I discovered the opportunity to become an aerospace engineer, and I started to do a little bit more research on that particular trade. And in fact, I recall going to the recruiting center. I was so keen to become part of the Royal Canadian Air Force. At the time, it was just the Canadian Air Force. Certainly, I went into the recruiting center, and I didn't even have my Canadian citizenship at the time. So I was at about a 3-year mark. And at the time, I was also enrolled in, or I was just finishing up high school and was accepted to University of Calgary. So I went into the recruiting center, and they say, the recruiter, provided the criteria, and one of them was you could not be a landed immigrant; you had to be a Canadian citizen. So I waited a year. I did a year at University of Calgary, pursuing my other passion. What turned out to be a year of waiting, really. Then finally getting accepted to the Royal Military College. So I was able to do my degree at the college, and after finishing, and all the summers were filled with getting experience in different types of platforms, which was fascinating.
And it's all about giving, and you learn though. And I'll tell you, being on those boards actually helped me to move up in my career at work. I feel that if I hadn't had those opportunities and got those competencies of presenting at boards, looking at evidence-based data to make sure that our policies were being were accurate or hitting the mark, and looking at diversity and inclusion even within Ismailis. There's a lot of diversity, and we need to look at inclusion. It kind of falls in with the work that I'm doing as well. So I always tell people that I work, who I'm mentoring, who are also working through the careers, to say you need to volunteer. You amazing competencies you learn through volunteerism, and you learn your ethics. I live by those ethics, where you have to help somebody who is less fortunate than you. And in this case, I have the opportunity not to just help one person, but a whole sector, or all the women in Alberta, right? So it's just very satisfying to do that.
I came to Canada with my parents. My father is a doctor in Ontario. My mother was his nurse for almost 50 years. I have a sister who's a doctor. I had an interest in government early. I started even in high school as sort of the class prime minister, and then I got a job working in Ottawa, and I learned about government through that while I went through undergrad and law school. And so that interest has always been there. That belief that we should get involved in our community and help out has also always been there, and was instilled sort of in me at an early age.
Life and service in the Canadian Armed Forces is certainly a team effort, and it's a family affair. Certainly my wife Amy and our young, almost 9-month-old daughter Anaya have sacrificed a lot already, being together and moving on multiple occasions, and certainly being away from family for long periods of time. Certainly, my mom and dad and my sisters and my brother, very don't see them very often, and certainly that sacrifice of not being in close proximity and being away from family on occasion really is a testament to the strength of service and recognizing the sacrifices that are involved, not just from me personally, but for the broader family. So I just wanted to make sure that that is talked about. When you do serve in the Canadian Armed Forces, it's truly a team effort and a family affair. Certainly want to thank all those that surround me to continue to serve. It wouldn't be possible without their personal sacrifice.
Ethics are ingrained in you. You grow up with, our Ismaili ethics. Do good, respect others, help others who are less fortunate than you. All those things are ingrained in you. You don't lie. Be transparent, be, collaborative. All those things are part of our fabric. And I think that's why I adjusted or adapted so well to government, because you need all those skill sets, or you need those ethics and values to be able to move in government, because you're not an activist. If you're an activist, this wouldn't work for you because things don't happen fast. It needs to be so no Nescafe solutions. They have to be very thought out, sustainable, making sure nobody's left behind. So it's the way I was brought up.
I have been involved in local councils, in national councils. I was the president for the Council for Ottawa for a number of years. I have had the privilege to listen to some of the guidance and to deeply understand the guidance. And so when you're in federal government, regardless of which department you're in, having that backdrop and having that understanding of some of the issues and some of the areas of concern for the Jamaat as a whole, and for the community outside of the Jamaat as a whole, is so powerful. And you take the seat at the table, and you bring all of these experiences with you to the table, and you use them to ensure that you are able to influence the policy making or the decision making for the benefit of the community at large. So it played a very, very huge role for me.
I find the aspects of service are very much ingrained within the Canadian Armed Forces, and particularly, reiterating the time that we spent in the Sudan and some of the incredible work that happened. That was incredibly enriching, but also, I believe, aligned with our practices in our faith, right? Trying to help where we can and serve those communities. I recall because we were the first observers going in there after a 40-year civil war, right? So it was a ravaged country at the time, and there was some significant infrastructure challenges and some challenges with just access to water, having roadways and medical access, obviously. Those challenges, and being able to impactfully provide those surveys. So one of the roles was to help the arms of the development network within the United Nations and other NGOs in the area to help them access some of those communities, but also to understand what the needs of those communities were.
There is a misconception about government workers out there that they don't really work that hard, and that's not true. Majority of the time, government staff are working very hard to get policies developed and for the betterment of Albertans or Canadians or whichever province they happen to be. And it's an amazing opportunity to be able to do that, because you're actually making impact, not just on my life, but everybody around me and in the whole province, and making sure no one is being left behind.
What our role is in the system is to be the impartial arbitrator, to decide cases as they come before us without regard to where you come from in terms of whether you're government or whether you're a corporation or whether you're an individual. You come to our courtroom, you get an equal footing. And that's important because, of course, not everybody will have the same resources when they come to court, which is why, for example, in the criminal context, the standard for conviction is so high, because we recognize that. And then the role of the judge is to decide those cases. And sometimes that means even making decisions that will upset the people that appointed us. But that's our job. It is our job to listen to those cases, determine the facts, and apply the law to those facts.
I'm hoping, especially in this portfolio that I have, which is Status of Women and Multiculturalism, is to be able to come up with some policies and strategies that will be sustainable and help us through this very difficult phase we're going through. where there's so much racism? How do we work together? And how do we collaborate better? And how do we use a diversity and inclusion lens everywhere, not just little pieces, but in every policy that we create? So we work very hard as Status of Women to educate other ministries and their staff on when they're making policy or developing policy, to bring that lens of diversity and inclusion and gender analysis to everything that they're doing, so that no one gets left behind.
I believe that my role with Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada is going to have a huge impact because if you look at the trajectory of the number of immigrants that we're letting into the country, we're bringing into the country, it's been growing. It's been growing quite a bit, and I don't think it's going to stop. And so to be able to improve the processes, to be able to make it easier, to be able to take a client view of it on what can we do to make it easier for clients to be able to apply, to shorten the time frames from application to decision to folks landing from 2 and 3 and 4 years to 2 and 3 months. Is going to be, I think, significant for people who are in other parts of the world for whom the day-to-day survival is difficult, and if a decision is made faster on their files and they're able to leave the situation that they're in and come to Canada to safety, that's people's lives that are impacted. That's one. The second is when they arrive in Canada, where the work that we do from an Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada perspective is we work with service provider organizations like United Way and other immigration organizations. And how can we make it better for folks so that they can get to learn the language, they can get to a point where they become self-sustaining quite quickly and quite fast.
I must admit, I don't think about it in terms of, what am I going to be thought of centuries from now? Am I going to be a Lord Denning, who is often quoted, or not? I really think about it in terms of the individual person that comes before the courtroom. That person, to them on that day, their case is the most important case. And I want to try and hear them, what they have to say, what their concerns are, determine those facts and arrive at a just result that applies the law to those facts. And so I view my impact as one case at a time. Each case that comes before me is important and is deserving of that attention and that level of analysis.
It is a question I reflect on a lot. What impact will my service have on the country and on the Canadian Armed Forces? I look at that much more now as I'm in 23 years of service than I did when I first started. Is what impact and what legacy do I want to leave? When I first started as a first-line engineering officer in 407 Squadron in Comox, right away it was evident what the impact was. We were doing these drift net fishery patrols as part of the United Nations moratorium, Operation Driftnet, against driftnet fisheries, which are quite damaging to the environment. And I felt that the aspect of the role that we had as a maintenance officer supporting the surveillance asset that would deploy to some of these locations would have an impact on enforcing that moratorium, or the anti-piracy missions that the aircraft was part of, and so there are many roles that this aircraft plays, and other platforms as well.
People tend to say that if I only have a little bit of time to serve in the community, and that's okay. But serve in the community, whether it's with the Jamaat, whether it's with Jamaati institutions, whether it's outside of the Jamaat with organizations such as United Way or others, serve. The reason I say that is simply because not only do you get the skill sets and the knowledge, but you build your networking. People will get to see you. People will get to know you. And you also tend to understand, all of the empathetic things that I use right now at my work in improving, the way people are treated, the leadership aspects of things. I didn't learn that at work. I learned that with my community service. I learned that when I met with, I was a member for settlement. And so when the first refugees from Afghanistan came, I saw firsthand what their needs were, what they went through, how scared they were, but how happy they were at the same time. So I would say to folks, get involved, because when you do that work and you jump into the public service, it transitions itself extremely well. Once you're in the public service, then be committed to the service of public. That's what we do. That's what public servants are. It's to make lives of our citizens better, and to protect their health and safety. Take that mandate, because as Ismailis, we can give a lot, and the values and the ethics and the morals that we bring are ones that people will learn from us by watching us. And I think that's important.
What truly remarkable stories. It is amazing to see so many Ismailis reaching pinnacle roles and being able to contribute to our home in such unique and truly inspiring ways. As I reflect on Canada Day, I do think about the day I became a Canadian citizen at the tender age of 6 years old, where my dad took me out of school and then had to sign my papers on my behalf because my penmanship wasn't up to scratch. I know this is an experience for many members of the Jamaat, whether they came to Canada from Uganda, from other parts of East Africa, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Syria, India, Pakistan, or the multitude of other countries where our diverse Jamaat originates from. As a Member of Parliament, I've also had the privilege to host many Canadian citizenship ceremonies, including some right here in my riding of Parkdale-High Park here in Toronto on Canada Day itself. I can say in complete honesty and sincerity that this is one of the highlights of my work as a parliamentarian, to see the joy, the hope, and gratitude of newcomers who have made the active choice to call Canada their new home. But what I say to each of them at each ceremony is what I will say to all of you now. Canada is a great nation, a nation of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, because Canadians believe in helping each other, in paying it forward, and it is incumbent upon us to keep doing so. I think never more so than during this pandemic have we seen this Canadian ethic of giving back shine through, with Canadians working hard to support their neighbours, their seniors, those in their community in need. I thank everyone in the Jamaat for being so steadfast in this commitment, this seva, over the past 15 months. This generosity of spirit is truly something that defines Canada and its citizens. Let's turn now to take a moment to reflect on these citizenship ceremonies and their significance.
I swear
that I will be faithful,
that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty
Queen Elizabeth II,
Queen of Canada,
her heirs and successors,
and that I will faithfully observe the laws of Canada,
including the Constitution,
which recognizes and affirms the Aboriginal and treaty rights of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, and fulfill my duties as a Canadian citizen.
As a Canadian citizen.
As a Canadian citizen.
Thank you so much. Those reflections on citizenship were extremely powerful. Before we go, July 5th marks the beginning of the annual Focus Star campaign. This year's theme is Be Ready for Anything, Even the Future. With the world still grappling with the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, and with continued conflict, natural disasters, and refugee crises affecting so many of our Ismaili brothers and sisters around the world on a daily basis, I think the work of Focus has become even more critical. Here at home, Focus also makes possible many of the programs and many of the resources available through the Future Ready initiative, including supports for things like mental health, job skill development, youth mentorship, and family mentorship. As a refugee myself, like so many of those watching, I know how critical so many of these supports can be to improving one's quality of life and that of one's family, and I hope you'll be able to support that very essential work. You can find out more information at iicanada.org. We will now end as we always do with musical expressions. I had a very wonderful time hosting this evening's events, and I hope that each of you stays safe, stays healthy, and has a wonderful week. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
तन मन धन दीजे मोरे सैया को कहने को अमानी
We move in the world like water over concrete, subtly confused for a way. The moral soil that nurtures our condition deep beneath a grim city gray. A struggling plant through a crack in the pavement, working quietly to give fruit. In the name of Kareem, commander of the faithful, he is where my hope takes root. With salt water dreams, remembrance of idle talk. Oh yeah, yeah. I will find my way to the sea, long as I have you with me. I will find my way to the sea. Ancient ice, secrets that are fading, melting in the rising tide. The words of the wise, simply entertaining, falling on the deaf and blind. But there's a vibrancy in the deep frequency, awakening is underfoot.